Okay, Econ, Unit 2, Supply, Demand, and Price. Here are the review questions. If you need to write them down or you didn't get them all, go ahead and pause the video. Let's take a look at the law of demand. All right, so as price goes up, quantity goes down. So let's take a look at price. As price goes up, quantity goes down. So let me see if I can use a pen right here. Laser pen. Let's just go with a normal pen. So here's price going up and quantity is at 1. So we'll just go ahead and graph that real quick. And that is a perfect circle. And then the other part of the law of demand is as price goes down, quantity goes up. So here's a low price, quantity goes up. And it is not going to be a curve, but when you connect the dots, this is called the demand curve. I know it probably looks curvy because I can't draw a straight line, but this is what you call the demand curve. So if you were to graph it, it would look like this. This comes in, obviously. It becomes important later on. So a change in demand. Depending upon different conditions, there might be a decrease for demand. So you have the original demand, you have a price of $1.50 and people want 60 of them. But if the price drops to $1.25, people are going to demand less. So let's take a look at demand shifts. Why does demand shift for certain things? Well, I mean, I keep saying that economics is basically a study in human behavior. So blue jeans become more popular consumer good with teenagers. All right, let's take a look. So it's going to increase and go to the right. So if you go back to that graph, demand will increase, okay, and it will travel this way to the right. So if you want like a better understanding, it's probably a good idea if you sketch this out, because looking at demand shift and where it goes, you're going to have to visualize it. It's easier if you write it or draw it out. Pizzeria increases the price for a small pizza. So before I even give the answer, let's think about it. What happens when price goes up? Demand does what? Demand drops. So it drops and it moves to the left. So prices drop and the line moves to the left. So if you're sketching this out, which I really recommend, that you should do that. Insulin prices rise by $100. This one's kind of tricky. It becomes what's called inelastic. Okay. So demand, for the most part, is what you call elastic. It moves back and forth depending upon the product. Blue jeans, it's elastic. Pizza, it's elastic. But insulin, something that people need or they'll die, it's pretty inelastic. People will always, at whatever price, have to purchase insulin. So let's see. Consumers figure out they can lose weight by eating jelly beans. So the demand for jelly beans. So people want to lose weight, and they can lose weight by eating these magic jelly beans. So what's going to happen to demand? Demand is going to increase, and that line will move to the right. Hamburger, so the actual burger in the store, goes on sale. Okay, so the price drops, so it will increase. Walmart starts selling marijuana. Purchases from drug dealers, what's it going to do? Okay, you can get your marijuana from Walmart, which would probably be at a low price, and drug dealers, because they have to protect their investment with violence, usually their product is more expensive, so it drops. Requiring a picture ID before the purchase of cigarettes. So now people have to present an ID before they buy cigarettes. Now, before, people could just go in, not kids, you wouldn't sell to kids, but like a little 5-year-old walking in, I want a pack of cigarettes. It doesn't work that way. But you can't purchase in the state of California if you're under 21. Well, if you're 20, you can easily pass as 21, but now you have to show an ID. So what's going to happen to demand when now you have to prove that you are of age? Drum roll, it's going to drop, right? Because now people can't get away with lying. All right, let's take a look at changes in demand, and we're going to specifically look at the gasoline market, which involves cars and everything that gasoline affects. So first off, let's discuss the theory of the rational actor. Economics depends on the idea that consumers are making rational choices, but most people are irrational. So like they go shopping, they do impulse buying. Stores kind of depend on you to be irrational. Sometimes they fool you into doing stuff, and we'll talk about that later. So the first change in demand we'll discuss is changing in the number of consumers. And the example is hybrid cars. So as we started making the shift from like fully gasoline cars to hybrid cars, you started to see a drop in the demand for for gasoline. Prices sort of stay the same, but that's because they've reduced production to keep up with the demand. So, if they reduce production more, prices are going to go up. But if they reduce production too far, prices will go high. People will demand more hybrid cars, and they end up just losing money in the end. The other is changes in consumer income. And the example is unemployment. In 2010, when the crash happened, a lot of people became unemployed, and gas prices dropped substantially. I think in a couple places in California it broke $2, so it was below $2. Changes in taste and changes in expectations. So you have Teslas, which are fully electric cars, and then of course people want more fuel efficient cars, and you have the issue of global warming, and people who want to be more environmentally conscious are, probably choosing electric cars. Another change is a change in substitutes. So a substitute is something you can buy and that replaces another product you buy. So it may not be that it's completely like inferior. So it isn't that you go from Kraft mac and cheese to the store brand cheese or mac and cheese or something like that. So it isn't necessarily you're buying a cheaper option. It's just that you can purchase something different. So Toyota Prius versus a Chevy Malibu is purely gasoline, and a Toyota Prius is hybrid. Changes in complement. So a complement is something that comes with something else. So a complement to a vehicle may be tires. Complement to a vehicle is gasoline. So it's something that comes with something else. So battery power. So if you now can include more battery power in your vehicle, that reduces the demand of gasoline. Elasticity. Elasticity is when there are no substitutes available. And we talked about this before. Insulin is inelastic, but gasoline itself is elastic because of hybrids, battery power, yada, yada, yada. Also, medicines. Like allergy pills, you have Allegra. Those can be expensive. They can go as high as like $1 a pill. But if you go to Kaiser and pick up a bottle of, say, 50 or 100 pills, you can probably get them around 15 cents a pill. So it's quite a substantial drop, and I suffer from allergies, and I use the generic, and it's just fine. An inferior good, so an increase in income equals a drop in demand. It should be a decrease in income. I'm sorry, a decrease in income. Let me go ahead and fix that. D. There we go. So a little edit in the middle of a video. Decrease in income equals a drop in demand, and then people seek more generic brands. A normal good is when you see an increase in income and that equals a rise in demand. So this is what you call different goods. So an inferior good is basically a good you see when people have a drop in income. A normal good is when you see an increase in income. There isn't really one. So we'll talk about this later, but when your income doesn't move, let's say you get minimum wage, but you've been on minimum wage for 4 years, technically your income has been dropping, and we'll discuss why later. So it either is decreasing or increasing. And then a luxury good, it's pretty simple. A luxury good is you see an increase in income and you see a rise in demand, but then you start to see items purchased that are wants that you may not see purchased when there's a general decrease in income, like diamond rings and things like that. So let's take a look at supply. We saw supply. Let's take a look at, or I'm sorry, we saw demand. Let's take a look at supply. So let me get my little pen here. So price and quantity. Oops. As price goes up, quantity goes up. Now you got to get inside the head of a businessman here. If people are purchasing a large quantity of items and you price it at $5 and they're still purchasing it, and you may even be running out and you got to wait for shipments to come in, raise the price, raise it to $6, $7, $8, $9, $10. And if people are still buying it like crazy, go 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, $15. So when you see a rise in price, let's see, there we are. Rise in price, so price is at 10. The quantity will be at 10. So a little circle there. So you can probably imagine the opposite. When there's a drop in price, the quantity is lowered. And where do you see this? Most often you see it with like sales. So if you go to like Old Navy or something like that, usually they're having a sale. There you go. You see a sale, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to get rid of the stock that nobody's purchasing. And if they can get rid of it at a lower price, and if they can't, I don't know what they do with it. Maybe ship it off back to the company. I don't know. I know with Super Bowl shirts, they have the shirts like right after. And you're like, wow, how did the winners get those shirts so fast? Well, what they do is they print both teams. Um, uh, they print them as like both teams had won. So the winning team, that's the shirts that they hand out. But then you have all these shirts that say the other team won. They give those to kids in like poorer countries. So you may see like pictures of kids in poorer countries running around with like, the Cleveland Browns won or something. Well, they'd never get to the Super Bowl, but all the same, the Cleveland Browns won or something like that. So if you take a look at supply, supply is driven. Supply is driven by the profit motive. So that's where you get that. The higher the price, the higher the quantity. They want to sell, and they have a constant new stream of products to keep consumers wanting to consume, and basically that is the profit motive. So you have types of goods. You have perishable, you have fruits and veggies. Those things go bad. You can't let them sit for too long. Milk is perishable. You have non-durable, like Solo cups, use once and throw away. I don't know if anybody reuses Solo cups. I rarely do. And then you have durable like mattresses. You'll probably see that mattress stores are always having like a going out of business sale or some sort of sale, and things are constantly on sale, and that's because they're trying to get rid of their stock. I mean, how many times do you swap out a mattress? I mean, mattresses can last, 12 to 20 years, depending upon how much your back can take. And, with mattress stores, there aren't that many, or even furniture stores, there aren't that many, and they always seem to have stock. And, they need to bring in like newer stuff. I mean, the furniture that may have passed as furniture in the 90s isn't necessarily going to pass for, hip furniture for, 2010, 2020. So if you take a look at Pete's, how has the price of Pete's fresh turnip pie risen recently? And you can see that it has gone up. And then the law of supply is here's all the turnips coming in, here's a long line of people, and turnips are gross, so I think that's what they're going for. But apparently people love turnip pie. They're completely disgusting. All right. So when Heath Ledger died, someone took a picture of this, and companies do take advantage. So I think this was at a Best Buy where they set out all of Heath Ledger's movies, and we're like, oh, remember Heath Ledger and purchase his movies. And it's like, it's it's kind of sad, but it's also capitalism. And Lords of Dogtown is a good movie, so I do have to give them that one. Changes in supply. The cost of resources. So it's what you call input. So if you are a pizza maker, you have to buy all your supplies from different distributors. So your vegetables, your I don't know if you make your dough there. Let's say you do. So you have your wheat, you have your flour, you have all the stuff that goes into dough. You make your own pizza sauce. So you have your tomatoes, you have, your oregano, and then you have all the stuff that goes on top. You have the cheese. So you have to bring in a lot of different supplies. Well, let's say you get your tomatoes from Florida and Florida suffers a hurricane. That's going to raise the price of tomatoes. So you're either going to have to raise the price of your pizzas or take a hit and hopefully you weather it out. End up taking a bit of loss. So the effects of weather, and then right now we're discussing, or at least you'll see in the news, tariffs, where Trump is tariffing a number of products, and that is, farmers are having a tough time because in retaliation, China is tariffing products. And we'll talk about trade wars and things like that much later. But tariffs are basically a tax on trade. So if you have an import from another country and you tariff it and try to protect your, domestic supply and your domestic businesses, another country may, retaliate or something like that. And we'll talk about it later. It'll become more clear later. Productivity, so you cut personnel to increase profits. That happens a lot. So if a company isn't making a lot of profits year to year, sometimes they'll cut personnel and make people work harder. And, it kind of sucks because that means that you're not going to have a job. And then technology, automation, it may increase productivity. I think they just put kiosks in McDonald's. So that eliminates the need for a cashier, and they reduce the amount of personnel. And government policies, we spoke about crowding out, where the government can, take over a certain market, and then other people can't compete. So, like construction, if the government's building a road, and they use their own city employees instead of like contracting with a private contractor, that can reduce the amount of public contractors. Regulations, subsidies, things like that. Competition, people can out-compete you. And then market expectations. So we expect to go from like iPhone 8 to the iPhone 10 until we get to like, I don't know, the iPhone 18. I don't know when people are going to wise up, but all right. And then you have something called economies of scale. So if you look closely when you're buying canned goods or something like that, you'll see that, you have a small can, a medium can, and a big can. And if you take a look real close at the prices, you'll see that the price per ounce reduces the more you buy. And that's because it's cheaper to buy in bulk than it is to buy individual cans. Because if you think of all the metal that goes into an individual can, and all of the effort that goes into filling those individual cans, if you can just fill one big can and then cap it and go off and ship it, it just gets easier to buy in bulk because companies haven't, it's easy for a company to like overproduce. So if people are willing to buy more of that, and in the end, it's cheaper for the consumer. Shopping at Costco can be cheaper for the consumer. Um, this is one of the things that actually hits poor people harder is if they're buying like meat daily or every 2 days. That can be more expensive than if you go to Costco and put like a chunk of change down, cut it up and freeze it. You'll end up saving money in the end. And then planned obsolescence. The light bulb. Light bulbs break. I mean, they have, maybe 2, 3, 4 years. However, Edison built light bulbs that still work today. It's been on for over 100 years. Maybe there was a power outage, but all the same, it's been on for 100 years. So why do light bulbs break? And light bulbs break because, well, I mean, a company has to continue to create products. And that's the thing with like market expectations. Apple got in trouble. You have to constantly update your phone. It slows down. So then you're like, I need a new phone. And it's kind of against the law to do that. You can't really force consumers to buy your products like that. You can't have your products just up and break in order to get to have your customers come in and have to buy more of your stuff. So packaging, sometimes it looks goofy. There's literally nothing, like no difference between the two. Um, you got sleep and relax and colon cleanser. One will keep you up all night and the other one will not. So you got to watch your packaging. Um, this looks like a what do you call them? Uh, energy drink, but it's actually radiator coolant. So it's for your car. You don't want to go drinking it. And then packaging got a little weird. I noticed packaging started changing, like maybe because I was older and I started paying attention. But you know how like you open up a bag of chips and like half of it's chips or something like that. I remember Snickers did this. So the average Snickers bar, they shrunk the average Snickers bar, but then they made a bigger Snickers bar that is still smaller. So you have think of the original Snickers bar. It is of a certain size. Then they shrunk that bar by about a third. So that is the new size of Snickers. But then if you take the new size of Snickers and double it, that is their king size. So in a sense, they're still making money because their king size is twice as much, but that original Snickers bar is, whatever. And then you have the fun size Snickers you get at Halloween, which are basically the original size Snickers bar just cut in half. But you only get that for like I don't know, you can get that year round, but you mostly see it at like Halloween or something like that. So they change sizes in order to make more money, changing their product around. And then a value pack, so super size. And then this kind of like sat right there, and then you unwrap it, and then you see that there's a smaller tube of toothpaste. And then dents in the bottom of containers, so you get a sense of, wow, look, I'm getting like extra whatever, and it turns out there's a dent in the bottom of the can, and you're really not getting that extra you thought. That's why it's a good idea to pay attention to like ounces. There's really nothing you could do about it. I mean, if that's all that's on the shelf, that's what you're going to buy. But they don't have to. They can increase the size of the package, but decrease the bottom. Makes it look like you're getting more, and you end up paying more when in fact you're getting less. And so that's a video we're going to watch in class. But just moving on, changes in supply. So let's take a look at supply shifts. Schools across the country stop using textbooks. Where can you expect? What are you going to expect the supply to do? It's going to drop and it's going to go off to the left. So this will make more sense if you were to like sketch out on a piece of paper, a graph, and you can just sit there and go back and forth, draw a supply out, and then just watch it go one way or the other. So if you take a look at the bottom part where you see, they want to, you have a high price, large quantity, and just see it shift back and forth. So So they stop using textbooks. Schools stop using textbooks. So the quantity goes this way, and price drops. Doctors have obtained excellent results using vitamin E to cure acne, and you'll see supply go up. I mean, if you think like, oh, something simple is like vitamin E, you can pick that up at CVS, and it does wonders for acne. So great, teenagers. The demand for bubble soda drops. So demand drops and supply drops. Businesses aren't going to waste their time trying to sell products that nobody wants. There is a greater threat of flu this summer. So what are you going to see like with flu shots or something? It's going to be inelastic because people need flu shots. They're willing to do what they can to get a flu shot. You may have people like if they raise the price, you may have people who are able to, or you may have people who are able to dodge it. But if you have young kids or older people, you're not going to see demand go up and down for that. California says you can't use your cell phone while driving, but Bluetooth is okay. You're going to see the Bluetooth market increase. And milk producers are paid by the government to not produce milk to keep the price steady. And that is inelastic. And it's inelastic because people drink milk, and the government adjusts how much the government gets involved to adjust how much milk is out on the market, and keeps the price inelastic, keeps it consistent because they don't want to overproduce milk. We'll discuss why later. So something called marginal returns. Now we discussed marginal returns before with the example of like the alarm clock, and where you try to get that incremental change to get some sort of added benefit. So if you take a look at, here's the number of workers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up, and the amount of product you produce per worker. So with 1, you're not doing a lot. With 2, you get 3. With 3, you get 6. And I mean, it increases. The increase is, it's a calculus problem. It's not like you can predict what's going to happen. You just you just hire an employee. When you see business growing, and when business levels off, you may see diminishing returns. So you add that 5th employee, and you see a stiff drop in like what you're able to do until you get negative returns. So basically, you're spending money. You're spending too much money. So basically, like this is profits, an increase in profits, okay, and then you see a drop in profits. And now you start seeing a drop in revenue. So revenue is how much money you make, and profit is how much money you make minus the cost to do business. So let's take a look at costs again. You have a variable cost. So electricity depends on if you grow or don't grow. A variable cost, the amount of goods used to stock the shelves. We have a fixed cost. If you go into like Target and take a look at those registers, they look like they're 30 years old, and they still work. So that is a fixed cost. Variable cost, part-time checkout clerk. A fixed cost is rent. Rent usually doesn't go up or down. And then the manager. So you have employees that do, like the checking, the bloop bloop, and stock the shelves and stuff. And those employees can come and go. But usually managers have to stay consistently a manager. That is a position that will always be filled with someone. So that is a fixed cost. So you're going to do this in class. You're going to graph this and then answer questions about it. So if you weren't in class for this, pause and go ahead and do it. So if you combine supply and demand, you get basically a market price, and we're going to fill that out in class. So you get a market price. So where supply meets demand, you get price, also called equilibrium price. If you have your supply up here, so let's say you're supplying something in 10 right here. You want to be, this is at like 7 right here. So this intersects, the price is 7 and the quantity looks like 3. So if you're supplying like 6 instead of a quantity of 3, you're going to have excess supply or a surplus. If you're supplying a quantity below 3, like 1 or 2, you're you're going to have a shortage, and that's excess demand or excess supply. And you don't really want either. You don't want stock sitting on the shelves, and especially if you have a certain kind of goods. So if you have perishable goods and you always have stock sitting on the shelves, you may need to try to produce less. And this is something where the government gets involved because if you remember from U.S. history, you had too much overproduction on farms, and that dropped prices, and farms started going out of business and stuff like that. It causes a lot of havoc. And then if you have a shortage, I'm trying to think of the last time there was like a major shortage of something. Things that sell out really quick. Maybe you can think of like movies. If there's a really popular movie and you only have so many seats in a movie theater. Remember The Dark Knight? It was really hard to get tickets when that opened up. And it's torn down now, but the Dome Theater, that was a great theater. So we saw that at the Dome Theater, and that was packed. Wasn't really a popular theater, but that theater was packed when we saw it. So let's take a look at the advantages of prices. It's a measure of value. So if you see a vehicle that's like 10 grand and you see one of 50 grand, you're like, why is that worth 50 grand? It's probably more valuable. Prices are a signal. It tells you if something's in like short supply. So if you see sales or something like that, or like a markdown, it gives you a sense that like a lot of people want it, or that it's going to be leaving or something like that. So you may pick it up. Walmart does that like intentionally, like here's what we should be selling it at, and here's what we are currently selling it at. But sometimes that top price is made up. It's like what they would like to be selling it at, and then they cut it down to what they really want to sell it at. It's kind of a mind game a bit. Flexibility, prices are flexible, and that's a big deal. We talked about command economies and how prices were set. And if you don't have enough people who have enough money to buy your product, then your product's sitting on the shelves and you have excess supply and demand's there. It just gets really muddy. So by making them flexible, you can drop price, raise prices all on your own. Costs, you set your, you set a budget or something like that, and you're like, groceries are going to cost like, $400 a month or something like that. And you can always sort of keep it within that $400 a month. So it tells you like, what do things cost? What is this? How much property in terms of money am I going to have to hand over to, sustain myself for the month? Choice of goods, like I was talking about the Snickers bars, you have different prices, and you're like, well, I want a Snickers bar, but I don't want that much of a Snickers bar. So it gives you choices in products. And it's efficient because it kind of runs itself. And one of the videos, we'll take a look at pricing as a signal. It's going to talk about how all this stuff kind of like comes together. It just gives you a good visual. Price discrimination. So we think of like discrimination as like something bad. But there are things like senior discounts or memberships. So Costco, you can't shop there without a membership. And senior discounts, if you're 65 or older, you get a drop. Or sometimes there's military discounts or student discounts, things like that. Sort of a way to, reward certain groups for coming out and making a purchase. Senior discounts are to get more of a population in to say like a movie or something like that. Is to attract, maybe older people to the movies, because usually older people aren't too hip as to what's going on in the movies. It's like music. I don't understand music today. Apparently they draw all over their face or something like that, and they're on YouTube. I don't know. But wait until you're my age and you won't know either. So we'll all be equal. We're going to watch a video on price gouging. We'll do that in class. And then here's, I guess you can call it price discrimination, but orange juice, $5. Juego de naranja, the pronunciation is probably terrible, $4. So really they're discriminating against people who don't know Spanish. I think now you may think that this is discrimination, but Here you have the darker skinned Barbie and you have the lighter skinned Barbie. People prefer lighter skinned Barbies. I mean, all people, not just lighter skinned people, all people. If you had me last year, we probably watched a video where it's black doll, white doll. And even black kids preferred white dolls over black dolls. It's just something culturally, it's sad, but it's just something culturally we're tuned to. So you may see something like this and it's discriminatory. Like, how dare Walmart sell stuff like that? And it's like, well, it's based on supply and demand. Economics just reflects our own prejudices, but economics itself isn't. And it's the store. It's consumers are choosing this. It's not Walmart saying we're gonna undervalue a dark Barbie or something like that, or a darker Barbie. It's basically the people who demand it, us consumers. And I thought this was funny. Lost iPod Touch, $50 reward. Lost iPod Touch, $51 reward, and it's a different number. So it's basically you're turning it into a bidding war, even if the product doesn't even belong to you. It's a joke, but kind of shows you the whole raising prices to create demand. And then, well, let's see. Let's take a look at prices. A price ceiling. It's a ceiling is the price can go no higher than this. You see that with rent control, price gouging sometimes, and price gouging basically is where you see something in demand. Usually, if there's like an emergency or something like that, and people are like coming through in droves, and you have fresh water or cases of water, and you start selling them for like $400, and people are willing to spend whatever they want. You're like, dude, supply and demand. Well, that's price gouging, and it's frowned upon, and the government usually steps in and slaps you. So there is sort of a price ceiling when you think of like price gouging, but a famous price ceiling is rent control, where in New York City, rent can, under the laws of supply and demand, rent can be just out of control and price people out of the market, and then, all of that stuff. Some people say, let's get rid of the price ceiling. It'll price people out of the market, and then eventually rents will come down and people will be able to go in and afford those rents. Whether or not that's true, whether or not it'll take a while for that to happen, but then in the meantime, you have a lot of homeless people and local businesses have to suffer. It's like if they can't live there, where are they going to live? It just creates a lot of havoc. So the government comes in and says, all right, you can't charge more than this price. A price floor would be like minimum wage. Minimum wage is you can't get paid less than a certain amount, because below that amount, it's very hard for you to live. And again, the same people may say, hey, look, get rid of minimum wage, and people will stop people won't seek jobs that pay you $3 an hour. So, of course, those jobs will have to charge or pay more. Well, that doesn't really work, because people are willing to take any amount they want or can be offered, and are willing to live in certain circumstances that, they might not be conducive to good living. And then, so here's, price floors, demand for workers. We'll talk about that in class. And then we are going to discuss healthcare in terms of supply and demand, but again, that'll be in class. And that pretty much concludes everything.